Welcome to Big City, Small Town, the weekly podcast all about San Antonio and the people who make it go and grow. I'm your host, Bob Rivard. This week's guest is Jeff Arndt, who has served for 13 years as president and CEO of Via Metropolitan Transit, San Antonio and Bexar County's public bus system. Jeff is also on the cusp of retirement, and we're going to be talking both about his long years at Via, what he's accomplished, and what the future holds. Jeff, first a personal story. What brought you to San Antonio and got you into transit?
That's a very interesting story. I grew up in a small town in northwestern Indiana, LaPorte, Indiana. Okay. So small that there were no buses. There was no transit system. I grew up believing I would never leave Indiana. Hardly thought I'd leave LaPorte. All my family lived there. We went to the same high school together. But when I graduated from Notre Dame, notice still in Indiana, right?
Great school.
Yep. I got a job and it took me to Los Angeles. So I went from a very small town to Los Angeles, and I was working as a traffic engineer and moved around in that firm. They opened a new office in Houston. Real estate values in Houston, when you compared them to California, even back then, were extraordinarily superior. And so I became a junior traffic engineer in Houston, Texas. We had a contract with Houston Metro, so I kind of started learning about transit, and I think I got drawn to it because you are really in touch with your customer. You know who your customer is. So most of what I dealt with up until then was dealing with cars. They may have had people in them hopefully they did, but they were cars, very impersonal. The whole fact that you could know the people you were serving and you knew what you were doing for them, that made it very attractive. So in 1980, I started at Houston Metro. I've been in public transportation since. At one point, a deputy CEO job was created by my predecessor, and I was recruited to San Antonio out of running a private operation in Houston at that time. I wanted to get back into the public sector, and I was convinced by my friend, who is also a recruiter, if you want to get back into public transportation and you want to be near your family, which are now my family is all in Houston, there aren't a lot of options, and San Antonio is a good option. So that's what brought me here.
Wow.
Now, I have to add one more thing.
Do so.
When I was in first grade, and people know me, I know that, I'm into theater, and in Houston actually participated in community theater at a very low level, but nonetheless. So my very first role in first grade, I was the lead in a play, and I played William Travis at the Alamo. So I think I've been fated to live in San Antonio.
That's a great story. I'm impressed that the small town school in LaPorte decided to put on the Battle of the Alamo.
Yes.
That's incredible. Well, you've spent probably more than half of your life in Texas then, even if you were an Indiana native.
No, I've been in Texas I was 22 years old when I moved here.
Okay. Wow. Well, talk about the Via of, 13 years, 2010 or 11, Jeff, when you arrived. And of course, you were coming from Houston. So you were in a better financed mass transit system in Houston, and you probably, of course, you knew that coming to San Antonio, that the sales tax was not as robust here as it is in other Texas cities. And you and I have talked about that many times, because that's been a real governor breaking the Via system from not growing more robustly. But you knew what you were coming into, and what was the system like when you came here 13 years ago?
I will just tell you, because I've been involved in transit nationally as well. Via always had the reputation of being a very well-run bread and butter system, which is what you can run on the kind of financing they have here. So that was the first thing. This was not a system that was in disarray. And, of course, I wasn't coming in as CEO in any case, but it wasn't one where you were going to spend a lot of time having to dig out of problems, right? It was a place where you would have opportunity to help that system hopefully grow. And if you recall, back in 2012, that was when the streetcar discussion was going on. And so there was this project there as well. And I think that there's something internal to me, and I think it's part of why I've stayed in public transportation, which is this kind of embracing of working for the betterment of what I would say underdogs, if you will, right? People that really have to fight And if you think of the transit market and the people who ride transit, many of them really have to fight for things that we take for granted. And there's something in me that is just all about helping in those circumstances. Well, to some degree, you could look at VIA and Houston Metro, is that, VIA was the underdog. VIA brings in about 75% less money than Houston Metro does to serve the same size area. So that's a big juxtaposition.
That's shocking.
Yes.
And I came here from New York City back to Texas, Jeff, in 1989, and immediately realized that unlike New York, where the subways and buses were how I got around, and buses were how I commuted from Hoboken across the Hudson River in New Jersey to the city, that this was strictly a system that was being used by the working class. And that nobody that I knew where I moved, nobody that I worked with at the San Antonio Light took the bus or knew what bus route they lived on. And it was a very strange thing for me coming from a mass transit environment to San Antonio. And how much has that changed has it changed over the years?
I don't think it really has changed appreciably. And I don't think it's all that different in most other systems.
Okay.
For some reason, transit is almost embarrassed by that. On a national basis, almost embarrassed. Oh, we need to find the, quote, choice riders. I say by choice, not choice. Choice is a kind of meat, right? By choice means they're choosing to do it. But I think what we do is noble and necessary and important. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about the fact that you're helping people who are struggling to put food on the table sometimes to get to a job. I mean, I think that's extraordinarily important. And as much as I like lattes, I think it's more important that a person be able to get, a barista be able to get to that job than me be able to buy a latte, right? That's a convenience for me. It's a necessity for them.
And, as we talked over the years and became friends, it was evident that one of your goals was to really increase ride frequency so that people didn't have to wait at bus stops as long, and so that the total amount of time they spent coming to work or going back home was reduced. That was a major priority for you, and it seems to me that you did make some serious headway there.
Yeah, we did. So first of all, frequency, I think frequency is the key to service. And you were in New York, you know how frequent the service was there, and it's almost intuitive. If you said to anyone, if you had a bus that ran by your house once an hour, how likely would you be to take it? Probably not. Well, what about if it ran by your house every 10 minutes? Maybe so. And all the national research says that if a bus runs every 10 minutes, about 85% of people would be willing to consider it. I know there's a lot of other factors, but 85%. When it gets to 30 minutes, that drops into the 15%. And when it gets beyond 30 minutes, it drops to the 5%. So imagine you have a product you're trying to sell that 95% of people say, I have no interest in that product. So how do you sell that product? Unfortunately, the average route in VIA right now is 60 minutes.
Really?
The average route.
Part of that reason, Jeff, is because of the footprint that you serve. And as you just mentioned, it's literally equal. You can overlay the San Antonio map on Houston, a city with a population of 3 or 4x of
right.
what
About 3 times.
Our metro area has. And it begs the question, is VIA trying to serve a footprint that it shouldn't serve? And should it reduce itself to a more urban system rather than just suburbs? And would it then, achieve the frequency that it would love to have?
That's a great question that comes up on occasion of, well, why don't you just run service inside 410? And if that's all we did, we could run a lot of service. Unfortunately, the people who live in 410 wouldn't be able to get to the jobs outside 410. And jobs are spread as much as population, right? So you need that access. So what we've done and beginning in 2019 is we've tried to we're creating a system where the core, and I'm just going to say roughly 410, but not exactly 410. The core is where we're going to focus bus service, and we're going to be able to, therefore, increase frequency within that core. And then around the core, we're putting in what we call VIA Link. I think you know about VIA Link, which is kind of an Uber or Lyft-like service within limited geographic areas. Transit, I remember back in the 85, 86 time period, as the suburbs were really growing in Houston even, that everyone says, well, buses just don't work in the suburbs. The way they're laid out, the street network, the lack of density, and yet every transit system in America put buses out there. It's like, buses don't work, but hey, the only thing we got is a hammer, so we're going to pretend it's a nail and bang away at it, right? The thing was, we were right. It doesn't work well. Buses don't serve the suburbs well. They can't. And technology has permitted us to put in this more demand response service. So what we've done in some of these areas is we've taken the buses that ran once an hour in just one piece of that area, so it's fairly limited, and we've taken the dollars for that bus service and the buses out and replaced it with this point-to-point, anywhere in the zone, anytime you want to go, right? Direct service, which operates quite a bit like Uber or Lyft on an app. You book the trip, you know what vehicle's coming, you know what time you'll arrive, you rate the driver at the end of the trip. By the way, the average Via Link rider has a rating of 4.8 to 4.9 out of 5.
That's pretty high.
Very high.
But yet when you look at our distribution, both in terms of residential and job centers, to the south, you've got Port San Antonio and Brook City base. To the northwest, you've got UTSA, you've got the medical center. You've got quite a concentration of corporate jobs with USAA and Valero and New Star Energy and others out there. And so you can't compress it down to 410.
Right.
You've got the 1604 dilemma, right? And if I'm not mistaken, I see Via buses outside of 1604 in Alamo Ranch and other areas, don't I?
Approaching. And 1604, for example, so my granddaughter is a junior at UTSA. She's also legally blind, so she relies on Via to get around. And she works in the Rim, which is quite, not way outside 1604, but north of 1604. She rides the bus to and from UTSA every day, and that she's working, obviously. And when she wants to visit me, since I live, in Lavaca, she'll take that same bus to the transit center by my office, and we pick her up there. So we do run outside of 1604, but for example, at UTSA, there is a Via Link zone as well that kind of covers that area. I think Alamo Ranch, we don't have much service out there. Ultimately, Alamo Ranch would be a good market for Via Link type service, the way it's developed. So that's really, if you think about it, a core bus service at high frequency and a series of transportation collection areas that both will feed you within your neighborhood and will also connect you to the bus service. So every one of those has a direct connect, at least one direct connection point to the mainline bus system. We treat it like a local bus. So the fare for Via Link is $1.30 base, a lot of discounts on that base. And if you transfer at that point, it's a free transfer, and vice versa as well. The thing I always tell people is we are a lot like Uber and Lyft with one major exception. We are always $1.30.
Can you pay that $1.30 now with an app or?
Yes, absolutely.
A smartphone? How does that work when somebody gets onto the bus and makes eye contact with the driver or whatever, instead of putting the coins in the old machine?
Yeah, we have an app where you can buy all kinds of fare media on the app, and you can prepay it within the Via Link app. In fact, there's a separate Via Link app. We're putting new fare boxes on right now that are going to increase the kind of fare instruments. Our vision is that you could go into Walgreens in the not very distant future and buy a pass that you use on the bus, just like you can buy a gift card for any number of organizations.
That makes it easier for not only the passenger, but the driver.
Totally. Absolutely.
Before we talk about some innovations and things that are on the drawing board, talk about the importance or maybe not importance of some historic things like park and ride. When did park and ride come about as a concept in American transit? And how important is that in San Antonio for, I'm sure it's important for things like Spurs games or Fiesta or downtown events like New Year's Eve, but is it an important day-to-day for commuters?
Well, park and ride concept's been around since I started in transit back in 1980 and probably before that, right? What Via calls park and ride is often called special event service in other areas. Okay, and it is exactly, Bob, what you described. You go to Crossroads and you get on a bus and it takes you back and forth. The second kind of park and ride, and one that we had in Houston, is the day-to-day park and ride. And so in that case, you have the park and rides that are in the further portions of the area, and they pay a premium fare. Because they're getting a direct trip into downtown. But what made their park and rides successful is they were all tied to HOV lanes, usually starting at that park and ride and maybe even upstream all the way into downtown. So the one thing that we haven't invested in Bexar County in much at all are HOV lanes. To make a suburban park and ride very successful, that HOV lane is important because it is a selling point. That's how I actually ended up at Houston Metro. Because when I moved to Houston, I moved from the Bay Area. My ex-wife and I, we each had unair-conditioned cars in Houston, Texas.
Oh, God.
Does that make you laugh?
I don't think they sell those anymore, Jeff.
No. And we would be, we would carpool to downtown, and we'd have the windows down on the stop and go freeway, which is just so totally unpleasant. And the HOV lane would be right next to us, and these buses would just fly by, and there was condensation on the windows. That's all it took. Yeah, I mean, it didn't take too long to say, hey, let's just get on that, right?
So HOV lanes go back as far as the 80s? I didn't realize that.
Yes.
And yet they're a relatively new concept in San Antonio.
Yes.
I get to use the I-10 one frequently because of going out to a ranch, and I really appreciate it, especially when traffic is heavy, but it's very abbreviated, coming and going, and I'm not aware of any other HOV lanes that are out.
There's a short one on 281 at the north end.
Okay.
So from about the county line, just short of 1604. We have built these two. The ones that we've built locally are far outside, headed in. The more successful way, I think, to approach them, and this is not meant critically to anybody, is you build them from the inside out. Because what we do is we get you quickly to the congestion, as opposed to we get you around the congestion, right? So in Houston, the route I took in Houston, that bus left every 3 minutes. In fact, we couldn't load the bus fast enough.
Why don't our HOV lanes extend to inside 1604 and do exactly what you say, which is defeat the congestion by taking the rider all the way to, let's just say, downtown? Or
Well, I know that TxDOT's working in the I-10 corridor to look at trying to do that. The 281 corridor, is a real challenge. 281, I wasn't here, but you know the history better than I do. Just the challenge of getting 281 in. That may not be a corridor where they can work that out, or it would have to be all elevated. There's the expense of that. But that's why in Houston, you had park and ride lots where the average income in the 80s was over $100,000 a year of a rider, which is quite different than even what we have today of a rider. And that's why you could get those people out of their cars and into that bus, because they could go around the congestion. And it was running so quickly that you would park your car and just walk onto a bus, and within a minute or two, you'd be on your way. You couldn't ask for much better quality service.
But they're looking at that for I-10.
I know that they're looking at how to extend the I-10.
And they're spending billions of dollars on I-35, both the 1604 connection, and then if you go all the way up to Austin, where they're double-decking up there, coming south out of Austin on I-35. And some traffic engineers that I've talked to about that have said it will only attract more vehicle traffic. It's not going to offer relief. And I don't see how, will there be an HOV solution in that schematic?
Yes, there will be. I believe they're calling it a managed lane, but different names for about the same animal. So on the elevated portions, the new portions up top, I believe there's 3 lanes in each direction, and 1 lane in each direction will be a managed lane. It would be wonderful if you could get that managed lane to carry all through and connect to the managed lanes that Austin is building our direction. Because at that point, when there's a lot of discussion about a connection, a transit-type connection between Austin and San Antonio, that's where you could start selling, at least initially, a bus-type solution if it had its own dedicated lane and didn't get stuck in traffic.
Define bus rapid transit for our listeners that aren't familiar with it. And why wouldn't bus rapid transit be exactly that solution between San Antonio and Austin, where you would, if you wanted to sit in the bus with condensation on the air-conditioned windows and a nice Wi-Fi connection, you would be zipping by all those trucks and cars that are bumper to bumper every day there.
So bus rapid transit, or we call it advanced rapid transit, ART, but bus rapid transit is a form of rapid transit that really started with light rail transit, right? Light rail transit was the predecessor to bus rapid transit. And it's typically in an urban environment because you're going to have frequent stops and connect to the system, right? If you have a stop in San Antonio and a stop in Austin, that's more like regional rail, right? Different technology than a BRT. It would be a different name. Nonstop service like that, doesn't matter what you call it, it would be a good deal, right? Bus rapid transit, like what we are, in fact, on December 18th, the FTA came here, Federal Transit Administration came to San Antonio, and I signed an agreement with them for $268 million toward the construction cost of the bus rapid transit line that we call Via Rapid Green along the San Pedro corridor. So that's the start.
Oh, congratulations on that. Let's just take a pause. That's a big deal. $268 million in federal funds?
Yes.
And that is going to be located on what length of San Pedro Avenue?
So we begin at the airport. We go south on San Pedro through, we come into downtown, through downtown, and then we continue south to Steve's and Roosevelt. That's the improvement zone, right? And the improvements that ART or BRT include are, first of all, service design, frequency, right? Every 10 minutes. 15 on the weekends maybe, but every 10 minutes through almost the entire workday. That alone, is a godsend to the transit. The second thing is it will be operating in dedicated lanes through a major portion of that project. So you're not going to be mixed in traffic. And frankly, the traffic is not going to be mixed with the bus either. It kind of works both ways, right? That helps you improve your speed and your reliability, right? The third thing is at the stations, where stations are stops, right? At the stations, people are going to pay their fares at the station and not on the vehicle. So if you ride a bus today, a local bus, you know that every time the bus stops and there are people that get on the bus, they pay at the fare box. That means, first of all, they have to come in the front door, right? Second of all, much like in the grocery store back when people wrote checks at least, the order gets rung up and then you start looking for the checkbook, right? Well, the same thing happens. You get on the bus and then you start looking for the fares. That really slows the whole running time down. So instead, you'll pay on the station platform or you'll validate. That's the other thing you would do if you have a pass. You validate it, right? And when the vehicle pulls up, it would pull up. The doors would all open because now you don't have to go by the fare box. Everyone gets on, the doors close, and it goes.
Back and front doors.
Back and front doors. And in fact, on the opposite side, because some of the stations will be in the middle of the street and some on the curb, right? On the driver's side, there'll be 3 sets of doors. So just imagine a vehicle pulls up, 3 sets of doors, everyone gets on, level boarding, which means if you're in a wheelchair, you won't need assistance. They won't have to cycle a ramp. We'll have self-securement so that the whole process of helping people who are in mobility devices get on and off the bus, again, which can kind of slow the bus down. It's necessary, but it does slow the bus down. Those things get mitigated. And so that combination of those things, and then finally the fact that the bus will talk to the traffic signals. And what it will say is one of 2 things. It will say, hey, I'm at a stop about to leave, and I see the green, but I don't want you to turn red until I get through. That's the one thing it could say.
I'd like one of those machines myself.
Yeah. Talk to me later. Or the second thing it might say is, I'm ready to leave and the light's red. Could you turn green a little faster? Both ways to get the green, either elongate it or bring it up faster, right? That will help the bus make the travel time. Now, I don't want to mislead, though. In the entirety of an hour, right, that signal is going to readjust. If it gave me extra time this way, the next cycle, it's going to adjust back, right? Now, our buses every 10 minutes are going to hit that signal cycle maybe once every 10 cycles, right? So there's plenty of time. They call that the recovery. So the net time north-south and the net time east-west remains the same, but there is this tweaking of distribution. It's not like an ambulance. It's not going to turn it red and hold it red. It will be a priority type use based upon the request and whether it's in a recovery and all those things. All that stuff together means that you're going to have more reliable travel time. You're going to have shorter travel time. You're going to have shorter waits. In combination, for example, if you are on the south side of town, that seems to be booming right now, right? South side of town, and you're trying to get to the airport on the bus, you're probably shaving 20 minutes off that trip time altogether.
What about for people arriving at the airport? Will this now be the way that if I'm coming to a convention downtown, a meeting downtown, I'm going to want to take that bus? Or am I still going to opt for a taxi and an Uber because it's about the same time?
I think it could be a little of both. Plus, we have a line right now that picks you up there and comes straight into downtown. But it doesn't operate at that frequency, right?
I've been on that bus, Jeff, and I mostly found airport workers on it versus visitors.
And that is fairly typical of that kind of airport service. I've been on airport service buses in other cities, and I'm usually the only, quote, pedestrian.
What year are you going to complete this San Pedro project to where it'll be operating?
We are completing final design right now. Expect to be out in the field probably March. I would say starting like utility pole relocation, get it out of the way of stations, for example, and stuff like that. And so by 2027, should be operating. So I would say anticipate a groundbreaking in March of next year and then an opening sometime in late 2027. I've already put them on my calendar so I can come back.
Before we talk about succession in your job and your retirement, let's talk about financing and where we stand, because it's not as bleak as it was when you started, and we were operating basically on correct me if I'm mistaken, but where most major metros in Texas were getting 1 cent out of the sales tax, we were getting a half cent. We now have moved under Mayor Ron Nirenberg to a system where we've reallocated the money that was going to protect the watershed. The watershed protection went into the San Antonio city budget, and the sales tax was reallocated to workforce development, but with an expiration date on that, with the extra 8 cent then coming over to Via Metropolitan that would increase you to 0.75 cents. Is that correct?
Roughly. So you're correct to start with that Houston, Dallas, and Austin, so there's 4 big ones in San Antonio, that all 3 of those do have the full 1 cent. So of the discretionary 2 cents that the state permits, all 4 cities, 1 cent goes to the city. In the other 3 cities, the other 1 cent goes 100% to transit. In San Antonio, we spread it. We spread the peanut butter thin sometimes, don't we? And so we spread it. Half a cent went to VIA. Then the first ATD, Advanced Transportation Sales Tax, that was the next quarter. Half of that comes to VIA. So we were actually on a half and an eighth is what we had. And then the other portion of that was split between the city and essentially the county, right? Then the last piece, the last quarter, was split evenly between pre-K and aquifer protection and linear creeks, right? So pre-K is still there, and it was voted again in 2020. That last piece, that last 1/8, right, is dedicated to the Ready Work program until 2026. At that point, it will come over to VIA. All of that will come over to VIA because the city and the county have both agreed that while technically they have control of pieces of that, then the voters approved a transit plan. And so both city council and the county commissioners court have essentially said, yes, the voters said it should go to the Keep San Antonio Moving Plan, so it should go there. So all of that will come in. That last 8 cents is the only reason we can afford to do the BRT projects, because that is the source of the operating funds for both that line, the green line, and a future line. And it's also the source of construction funds for the green line right now. And just one other point, which is that piece was for aquifer protection and linear creeks. And the county picked up the linear creek portion. And I believe SAWS picked up
I think you're right.
the other portion. But the county came in and took that half.
1/8 cent sounds minuscule to many of our listeners, Jeff, but in fact, over the course of years in a major metropolitan area, you've pointed out to me before, these are macro dollars.
Yes.
And the difference between what a Houston or a Dallas collected in Austin versus San Antonio, that just built up to where the difference was not just tens of millions of dollars, but hundreds of millions of dollars. And I would add to that because they had hundreds of millions of dollars more than us, they qualified for federal matching funds for various transit projects that we just weren't in that game.
Totally correct. The interesting thing, Houston Metro, their first light rail line, they built out of their savings account. They didn't even need federal help. They had so much money.
And what year was that?
It was January 1st, 2002 at 10 a.m. I was there.
So 22 years ago.
Yes. Now they've subsequently built additional lines, and they've subsequently, therefore, they use their savings, if you will. So they subsequently have pursued federal funding. What Houston Metro did to the industry, because of their funding situation, historically these kinds of projects were 80% federal, 20% local. And they came in and they said, how about we do it 50-50? It made it far more sellable to the federal government. And over time, that 50-50 split became the norm, not the exception. Now, on the green line, we're at 56-44, right?
Which way?
56 federal.
Okay.
So the federal government has been so extremely helpful in this whole process for us the first time we've pursued it. They have really bent over backwards to help us work our way through their system.
Do you think that happens, Jeff, regardless of whether it's a Biden administration or a Trump administration? Will we see stability on that front in terms of the relationship as we vie for more federal dollars?
I think that so you can only speak, what has the past been? The past has been that transportation has been pretty much, across the aisle, right? Everybody has transportation needs. The Republicans and the Democrats who are elected all have projects of this nature and of other natures, obviously, in their districts. And so they don't tend to say, we're going to shut that down, because they feel that everybody is benefiting from that. Now, predicting future behavior by past behavior, I can't do that.
Nobody can.
No, but
can you predict, though, that there are more collaborative deals that will be signed by your successor with the federal government because we're increasing our local investment in VIA?
So the 1/8 cent that we're going to start getting in 2026, I just have to say this. We went to the voters in 2020 with a plan, right, that we were going to start getting money for in 2026. But between that point and now, and we're not in 2026, we're just going into 2025, right? We have implemented big pieces of that plan. And how did we do that? With COVID relief funds, we kept them back, knowing that we had a major capital project, and we kept those funds back. They're one-time funds, so you can't use them to run things, right? But you can use them to design a project.
What kind of money were we talking about?
We're talking somewhere between $150 and $200 million.
Oh, real money.
Yeah, real money. If we hadn't had that, we would have to have waited until 2026 to start the whole process. But, we've always been very fiscally frugal. I'll just say that. I think sometimes when you don't have a lot, you're probably look at every penny a lot differently, right? And so we've been able to put in some of these new VIA link zones, using some of that money, knowing that when the 2026 funds start coming in, we can pick that up. That 1/8 cent is spoken for. So that's what they have threatened to make a T-shirt that said that 1/8 cent done been spent, but it has been fully allocated. It's allocated to future operating cost of the green line, because you have to be able to prove you can operate it in order to get the federal funds. Future operating cost of a second line, the silver line, the east-west line, and then maintaining some of the service that we've introduced early, right? So my successor in VIA moving forward, we do have a second project. It is the silver line, the east-west line, essentially from Our Lady of Lake University across to Frost Bank Center. It was not in the plan that the voters approved, because we knew that if we received that money, that we still couldn't fully afford that plan. And that was one thing I'm really proud that we did, because there are many systems that will promise a whole lot more than they're ultimately able to deliver. And we didn't want to promise anything that 1/8 cent wouldn't buy, right? So we didn't promise the east-west line, but it was in a plan. It was in the Connect SA plan that, Henry Cisneros and Hope Andrade helped put together back in 2019. So we started looking at that plan, and we started actually working on the plan, but we knew we didn't have the funds. We had enough operating money because we reserved that out of the 1/8. And that's the harder thing to get, because you need it every year. But we didn't have $100 million for the local match for construction. Commissioner's Court under Judge Sakai helped us out, and they have committed to $100 million to make that local match for the Silver Line. So without the County Commissioner's Court, and I think sometimes they get They're kind of the unsung heroes in some cases. In this case, I think very strongly. Without that $100 million, the Silver Line would still be just a dream. With that commitment by the county, it's not just a dream. Now we have the funding all lined up that would allow us to go to the federal government and get the same kind of grant we just got for the Silver Line. So we're working forward through that plan. That plan is probably 2 years offset from the Green Line. So if the Green Line opens in late 27, the Silver Line would open in late 29 or 2030 as those things roll out. Without that $100 million, though, we would be stuck. And that also means, if you think about the corollary to all that, which is we are fully committed at that point. All that new money is rolled into operating the Green Line, paying for construction of the Green Line, operating the Silver Line, operating the mobility on demand zones, the Via Link zones, and whatever frequency we can shore up.
Well, congratulations to getting all of that done in anticipation of the 2026 tax increase and seeing some of it realized under your watch before you go. When you look back at your years here, Jeff, is there anything that you really thought you might get done that didn't get done, or any projects you're leaving on the drawing board or table that you thought realistically could have been undertaken in your time here?
I think that for the first portion of my time here, I don't think I could have dreamed of the Green Line even, right? But we knew that there would be some opportunity. That's almost, that, as I said, on the 18th of December, it was like, I was living in a dream, right? It's something I dreamed of. It was hard to think it could be realized, but it was realized. And knowing the Silver Line is right behind it, that's like, icing on the cake. It's extraordinary. So if I look at what's left undone, I don't think it's any different than any other CEO leaving, right? A lot of it's internal. We're in the midst of rollouting some structural changes in the organization to better support how VIA is evolving. We're developing more training for our frontline managers, all those things that you want to have, right? And sometimes you don't focus in on them as much because, believe me, we have been running at 300 miles an hour to get all of this in line so we could get this full funding grant agreement before Christmas. And I just kept telling everybody, I only want one thing for Christmas, but it does cost $268 million. And they came through. They are remarkable people.
Looking now, here we are at the start of 2025. An awful lot's going to unfold in a good way for VIA in 2026 with this. What is a 1/8 cent sales tax? That's north of $30 million a year.
Yeah, it's north of $40 million. Actually,
40 now.
North
okay,
of it,
the city continues to grow. So you look at what's coming and the Green Line coming and then the Silver Line. You must have thought a little bit about, should I sign up for another 5 years here to see all of these projects to fruition? Or maybe you didn't think that.
I think my decision was made by a decision I made some years ago that I stuck to. And I'm not a person who just stubbornly said, I decided this and I'll never change my mind. And my decision was that I would be retired before I turned 70. I will turn 70 on February 2nd. I will retire on January 3rd. That, I believe, is today.
So congratulations
Yes.
in order for that. And I want to talk about life post-retirement. But first, what about the succession plan? I always feel like when people are able to promote internally, that's the sign of a healthy organization where there's good succession planning and leadership development. So talk about the next CEO of VIA.
I will echo what you just said. I think when you're able to hire the next CEO from within, it's a sign that things are in good order and things are moving in a good direction, right? After all, if they're not in a good order, are you going to hire somebody who's part of the bad order to rearrange things? The board, when I gave my retirement notice, I talked to them, and I have to say how much I appreciate my board because they don't have to listen to me about any of this. It's fully their decision. But I told them that I think we have a group of senior vice presidents, any one of which could be a successful CEO. And what they ultimately decided to do is interview from among that group the people that were interested, because all 5 weren't necessarily interested. And they said, what we'll do is we'll interview that group. And then if we're not sure or we're not satisfied, well, then we'll go through a broader recruitment process. We had done an initial recruitment process with an outside consultant, and he brought some names forward and everything. But the whole point was, as you say, we're kind of like a horse in the middle. You don't change horses in the middle of the stream, right? We're kind of in the middle of the stream. And unless you don't have confidence in the people that got you to the middle, you kind of figure they're going to get you to the other end. So I agree. I think it spoke really highly of the quality of the staff at VIA. I think we built, an extraordinary team. When you look at the senior vice presidents, we have Tremel Brown, who's been with the authority 35 years and came in as a part-time VIA trans operator, who's running the entire operation now. We have John Clamp, who's running administration, and he is a change agent. I'll say that. We have Rod Sanchez, who was really our primary person over at the city when we were doing the initial work here. It was like, okay, let's bring him in-house now. And he's amazing, and he's got a very strong team. Bonnie Prosser-Elder is chief counsel, and she's a senior VP, but obviously I think she really likes that piece of what's happening, so she wasn't interested. And then John Gary Herrera, who has been selected as the next CEO. So he's been with us for 7 years. He's been in public engagement. When you're in public engagement, as you can imagine, you really have to understand everything that's going on because everything gets thrown at you, and you can't always just duck and hide, right? John Gary, there are a number of things I really admire about John Gary. I think the thing I admire most about him is that he is self-aware, and he will admit when he has a weakness, and he will say, this is what I need to shore that up. That's a real sign of vulnerability and maturity that often is lacking, especially at the CEO level. He's a remarkable guy. He's got many, many contacts throughout the community. He's been around. He grew up in San Antonio. So I'm just really excited for him. Believe me, if I wasn't comfortable with any of that, I would be upset because I'm essentially handing over.
Absolutely. Your legacy.
Yeah. And at one time I said I felt like a foster parent giving the child away. And our vice chair, now our chair-elect, Laura Cabanella, she says, I think you're more like a grandfather. And at first I thought, oh, you think I'm old? But then I stopped to think, and I talked to her afterwards, and she says, no, it's the emotional connection. You're emotionally connected to your grandchildren. And she says, you clearly have an emotional connection to VIA. And as a grandparent, you're going to care very much about what happens. And that's where that statement came from. And I love it now.
Well, I think it's the emotional connection is very evident, Jeff, or you wouldn't be talking about coming to ribbon cuttings several years from now,
yeah.
Especially from where you're going. And we're running out of time, but I want our listeners to, and maybe those out there who are thinking about their own retirement, to hear a little bit about what your plans are post-retirement.
Sure. So I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, are you going to consult?" Or or I know you could consult. Or I've even had people.
I said it.
Would you like to join us and everything? And my response is, no, I'm retiring, and I understand what retired means better, or at least what it means for me. I appreciate people retire and then continue doing a lot of what they were doing before. My idea, I want to have a brand new adventure. I want to have this next chapter be something unlike anything I've done before. And so my husband and I will be moving to Mexico next year. And when I say moving, I mean moving, like 100% living along the Pacific side.
Selling the house in Lavaca.
Yep. Or leasing. We're still discussing that, Bob. But yes, we're not keeping it so we can move back every 6 months. We will be living 2 blocks from the beach with an oceanfront condo. I have trouble imagining what that's going to be like. What I do imagine is once we get moved, and I know there's going to be a lot of transition through that move, then I'm going to start looking around, but not necessarily, hey, what can I do in transportation here? I want to look around at maybe doing something completely different. Teaching math. I would love to teach math. I would love to sell jewelry in a jewelry store. I know that's completely out there, but there's lots of things I would like to do that aren't anything to do with transit, and this would be an opportunity. And fortunately, I have a lot of hobbies anyhow, so it's not like I'm going to wake up one day and say, I don't have an office to go to, so what am I going to do? I have a keyboard that I probably pay 2 hours a year right now because I just don't have time, and I'm looking forward to that.
Well, that'll be a great base also for exploring Mexico more deeply and That's a wonderful part of the Pacific coast there of the state of Nayarit where you're going. I'm curious, does purchasing real estate give you a path to residency there, Jeff? Because you won't be coming. A lot of people divide their time between San Antonio and San Miguel or Mexico City, other places on the coast. But you're going down there full time. So
yes.
Does the Mexican government, are you going into some official, program line where you'll become
I'll be a resident, but not a citizen.
And that's how it'll stay. You'll keep your U.S. passport, but you'll.
I could become a citizen if I desired, but you know what I want to do? I want to vote for the mayor of San Antonio.
I wonder if you'll be able to do that by absentee ballot from Mexico, or if you'll have to come back for a visit.
We'll have to see, won't we? But I am not seeking citizenship, but residency, which allows you to stay beyond the tourist limit, right? And so actually it's a two-step process. We've already finished the U.S. side, and next month, or later in January, we're going back to finish the Mexico side. And then we'll have residency, which means we can come and go and not have to worry about how long we're there.
Well, I've had a front row seat on the city for 35 years, Jeff, and you've been one of the really great public leaders in our city, and we'll miss you, but we'll also appreciate everything you've done at VIA and in the community, and we'll stay in touch somehow. Maybe come down for a visit.
Yeah, it's been nothing but a pleasure, and it's really been a pleasure to know you, Bob.
Well, thanks for coming on to Big City, Small Town.
Thank you.